Part 162. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1611. Mingda, third brother, you are too bad. Chang Yu rolled his eyes and said, I didn't even grab Yang Changbo, why would I grab a Bai Shan? Man Bao said to Prince Gong, my lord, you need to read more. Next time, you can recite the Book of Rites while climbing the mountain, it will help you learn to breathe. The three of them turned around together, leaving King Gong aback, and continued to enjoy the scenery under the mountain. Mingda looked at the sun on the horizon and said, the sun seems to be about to go down the mountain. I heard that the sunset scene on the mountain is particularly beautiful. Man Bao didn't miss the sunset, nodded and said, yes, let's go after watching the sunset. Chang Yu said, but I'm a little hungry. Man Bao took out a purse and gave it to her, there are fried beans in it for you to eat. It was the first time Chang Yu had eaten something like this, and while eating, he asked, where did this thing come from? It's really delicious. My sister-in-law fried the dried beans for me. It can be stored for a few days, but it's a pity it's not hot, otherwise it will definitely taste better. The beans were very crunchy, with a bang, 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 bang. Behind him, King Gong swallowed a saliva, and then his stomach growled. The three looked back at him together, and then Mingda and Chang Yu went to see Man Bao. Man Bao said to King Gong with a serious face, Your Highness, in addition to stretching your legs, you need to keep your mouth shut, so you can't eat it now, otherwise your mountain today will be in vain. But it didn't stop there. After Man Bao went down the mountain, he changed King Gong's recipe, removed all the dishes, and listed three things. One is steamed buns, not many, just two, the other is water-boiled lean meat is calculated in kilograms, the third is boiled vegetables, which are also given to him in a large pot. There is only one sentence in the recipe given by Man Bao, less oil and less salt. Aunt Chang had read it, and although she thought the recipe was a bit crude, but after looking at the quantity, she didn't think Zhou Man was treating King Gong harshly, so she asked the kitchen to follow suit. King Gong was happy when he saw so much meat, but after taking a bite, he couldn't be too happy. This is simply tasteless, why would he eat such a thing? How did Prince Gong grow up so big in this world with less abundant supplies? Of course it was food. Why can I eat so fat? Of course, it is because the food is delicious. King Gong likes to eat a lot of things. He is not too picky, but his requirements for things are not low. Every dish requires color, aroma, and taste. Even if he lost weight before, the quality of his diet has never decreased, but the amount has decreased. A dish that lacks spices, not to mention oil and salt, what else does it taste like? King Gong was chewing on the wax, only to feel that Zhou Man was taking revenge. But he stubbornly stayed silent. This situation only lasted until the next day, because Zhou Man brought him 2 sandbags when he came to see him again. Man Bao asked him to tie the sandbag to his calf and said, His Royal Highness's body has improved a lot during this period of time. Looking at this figure, how majestic, even His Majesty will be happy when he sees it, but his body is still heavy, so it's still a little bit. After I went back last night, I thought about it, and finally came up with a treatment method. Man Bao pointed to the sandbags on the ground and said, I have learned to climb walls before, and I know that martial artists have to tie sandbags around their legs to practice lightweight techniques, so that one day when the sandbags are unfastened, people will be as light as swallows, and they will fly. It doesn't take much effort to get into the eaves beams. King Gong looked at the sandbag on the ground and shouted, This king is not a thief, so what do you learn from this? His Royal Highness, who said that learning body lightness is to be a thief, you can still serve the country on the battlefield. Man Bao said, as a prince, you are supported by the country, shouldn't it be your due to repay the country? Prince Gong rolled his eyes unceremoniously. Can this prince lead troops to fight? There is nothing wrong with him, but would the crown prince and the ministers in the DPRK dare to let him take over the military power? Man Bao said, it's also because you don't have this ability. You can't even ride a horse. How can you lead troops to fight? Come and tie the sandbag to King Gong. The servants were accustomed to listening to her orders, and immediately picked up sandbags and tied them to King Gong. King Gong wanted to resist, but thinking of Zhou Man's words, he also wanted to know whether his father would let him go when he could lead the army to fight. Aunt Chang couldn't help but glance at Zhou Man when she saw that he was half pushed. Man Bao nodded secretly in satisfaction, and after climbing for less than 3/4 of an hour, King Gong regretted it. In the end, how he climbed to the halfway up the mountain and how he climbed down in a daze is completely unimpressive. Man Bao saw that he had tossed people a lot, so he turned back to the East Palace with satisfaction. Humph, she can't bully others, isn't it easy to bully her own patients? Only when I returned to the East Palace, I happened to meet the prince enjoying the scenery in the corridor in the garden, and when he saw her, he waved to her to pass. Man Bao walked past with the medicine box, and after saluting, he raised his head and smiled at him. The prince glanced at her smiling face and asked lightly, how is Prince Gong's illness? Don't worry, Your Highness, Prince Gong's health is getting better day by day. I guarantee that the crown princess will not have the energy to trouble you before giving birth. The prince, who just wanted to inquire about the details, didn't expect to get the answer he wanted the most. He was silent for a while and asked, it's just losing weight, is it so difficult? Man Bao looked up and down the prince and said, it's not difficult for you who like to ride to the martial arts field to practice martial arts, but it's too difficult for Prince Gong who likes to sit and eat without moving. The crown prince had already heard about it. He heard that Prince Gong was crying on the mountain today. He was crying and losing his temper, so he wanted to untie the sandbag. In the end, he was helped down by the servants. The prince still can't understand the pain point of this younger brother. However, recently, his troubles have indeed decreased a lot, although there are still people targeting him in the DPRK, but without this younger brother who loves to cause trouble for him, the burden on him is much lighter. The prince was still a little happy, so he said to Zhou Man, then you can treat Prince Gong well, but don't relax on the princess side. Don't worry, Your Highness, I'm watching over the crown princess. The prince nodded and waved his hand to let her go, when he suddenly remembered something and asked, why were you crying in the Changguan pavilion the day before yesterday? Man Bao paused and then defended, His Royal Highness, I didn't cry, I was just wronged. Prince Li, just because I was fined 2 months' salary. Man Bao grudgingly responded. The prince said, this time, 8 ministers in the court were fined half a year's salary, not only the salary, but also Lumi. Man Bao said, that's because they fought, but I was only late for a while, and there are ministers who are late on weekdays. The prince said, this time it's the loneliness that has affected you all. Well, don't you just want to make a face for your parents? The loneliness will give you a face. Man Bao's huh sounded confused. The prince smiled and waved, go back and be an errand. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1612. Man Bao silently went back to Changguan Museum. 2 days later, just when she was about to collect her things and go home, Bai Shan ran out of the room out of breath, went straight into her room, stared at her with bright eyes and said, I'm listening to Jean's affairs today. The people in the government said that the Ministry of Rights gave your father and mother a formal seal. Man Bao directly sprayed the water he hadn't swallowed in his mouth, and then coughed violently, Who? It's a seal, isn't it a gift? Your father's bequest is higher than yours. Do you need to use your official position to give the gift? Of course, it's for Uncle Joe and the others. Man Bao was stunned and shouted, I didn't give a gift to the Ministry of Rights. After a pause, Bai Shan ignored her words and said, I heard from the people in Zhan Shifu that the official of the Ministry of Rights who submitted the letter is from His Royal Highness Prince, and the book has been sent to the Zhongshu province. The side actually responded, and now Jizi is in the province under the door. As long as it passes the review of the provincial government and gets to the Ministry of Rights, it is 80% of the time. Bai Shan looked at Man Bao, and Man Bao also looked up at Bai Shan. There are not many official seals in this dynasty, although it is only a false name, and there is no money to take it. At most, the court will send some clothes and fabrics every season, or when there is a big happy event in the Chinese New Year and festivals, the court will give something as a reward. Things like pots and pans. But this false name sounds very good, which greatly satisfies the self-esteem of officials and those who have received official titles, and their status also rises rapidly. Regardless of the fact that officials can apply for their mothers and wives, very few applications pass. Because those who do not have outstanding achievements, those who do not have great graces, and those who do not work hard and make great achievements will not be awarded. The first type is mostly seen in military generals who have made great achievements on the battlefield, such as Yin Li and Li Shangshu. The second type is mostly in the imperial family, the third is that he has been in the civil service for many years, and suddenly he has not made great contributions. Small credits are accumulated continuously, such as Kong Jiju. Man Bao is not at all at present. She still wants to apply for her parents after she has learned medical skills, become famous all over the world, and saved countless lives. Unexpectedly, the prince will let her go through the back door at this time. At this time, Man Bao had a passion to die for his confidant, and said with tears in his eyes, His Royal Highness is really kind to me. Bai Shan took out a handkerchief and wiped the water from the corner of her mouth, nodded and said, It's good, the prince is bribing you. Man Bao tilted his head and thought for a moment, then said, Forget it, I won't do bad things with him. We should not let this complicated relationship go. Bai Shan thinks she is lazy, but the benefits given by the prince are indeed just right. He must not know, this is in the hands of Man Bao and the old Zhou family. There are not many people in the great Jin dynasty, and they can still enter the palace from time to time to attend a banquet, talk to the queen, etc. Although they have no real power, their status is not generally high. Man Bao is a rank 5, just stuck at the point where it can be sealed. If she applied, the Ministry of Rights would probably not give it, but if the prince applied, the Ministry of Rights would have to look at the prince's face. The prince's people in the Ministry of Rights were also obedient and knew that ordinary applications might not be given. Therefore, the application focused on the righteousness and benevolence of Zhou Jin and his wife. Man raised an adult, although his family is so difficult, but he can still read and write for Zhou Man, which has cultivated such an excellent talent for the court. Man Bao was sore when he read the book, but his colleagues in the Ministry of Rights were able to write it down without changing his face, and Man Bao admired him very much. The imperial court has always liked to commend righteous men, filial sons, and virtuous women in order to convey a value and educate the people. The behavior of Zhou Jin and his wife should obviously be commended. Although Zhou Man is not their biological daughter, they were raised by them. Now that she is an official, she also has the heart to apply for her parents' appointment, so why didn't the court take the opportunity to commend her? When Jizi arrived at Zhongshu province, he naturally arrived before the emperor. He heard that this book was written by the prince's person, and Zhou Man himself didn't know it. He thought about it carefully, although he didn't know whether the prince's move was to bribe Zhou Man, or to beat the end of the princes, the king of Yizhu, or is it both, or draw a circle on it with a pen. The emperor agreed, and Zhang Shushan naturally had no opinion, so he handed the book to Meng Xiashan. Wei Ji had been to Qilai village, and he had also seen Zhou Man, who was naive at the time, and he had also seen Zhou's family. Batch. The next day, when he entered the palace for the Xiaoqiao meeting, Wei Ji called the matter back, and he said to the emperor, although the righteousness of Zhou Jin and his wife is worthy of commendation, Zhou Man's achievements are shallow and not enough to be conferred. The emperor didn't care much about a formal seal, and heard the words, "This is the application of the prince." Wei Ji said to the prince, "His Royal Highness, why don't you wait for Zhou Man to accumulate enough merits before commending him?" The prince said, "Zhou Man healed Gu and his father before, isn't this enough to commend? It is the responsibility of the imperial physician to heal his majesty. It is the credit of the entire imperial hospital, not her alone." Zhou Man also acknowledges this. In terms of words, no one can really say that Wei Ji, and he did not say that he would not be sealed, but clearly stated that it was not the time, and Zhou Man's achievements were not enough. If her parents were sealed, other officials' applications how to say? The prince frowned. He didn't quarrel with Wei Ji on this issue again. After the court, the prince couldn't help but go to Wei Ji, "Why is Lord Wei stuck on this matter? No one has any opinion, because this does not involve anyone's interests, it is just a false name, less than 1/10 of what Zhou Yin bequeathed last year." Wei Ji glanced at the prince and said, "Your Highness, holding your son is like killing a son. If you are really good to Zhou Man, you shouldn't see her alone, there is the whole Zhou family behind her, and she is still in the Zhou family. There are 6 brothers and 1 sister." The prince raised his eyebrows, a little puzzled. Wei knows, His Royal Highness, running a family is like running a country, and running a country is like flying a kite. If you want it to fly farther and higher, it must be tight and loose. If you just let it go, the kite will fall when the wind blows. By then the line in your hand has already loosened, and if you can't tighten it for a while, the kite can only fall to pieces. The prince was stunned. Wei Ji was also one of the prince's lecture teachers. Seeing that he had listened in, he nodded slightly and walked away with his hands behind his back. The prince thought about it all the way, and when he returned to the East Palace, he saw Man Bao waiting for him with his legs crossed while eating snacks. When she saw him coming back, she immediately jumped up and ran over, gave a hasty salute and said, "His Royal Highness, you has the fold been beaten back?" "Prince, what should I do if I'm a little embarrassed?" Man Bao knew when he saw his expression, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That's good, let's put a little pressure on this matter, don't apply for it yet." The prince raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why, don't you want to be sealed?" Man Bao shook his head, "I think about it, I still think about it now, but my husband said that it is too much, and now it may not be a good thing for my family to be sealed." See you at 9. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1613. Zhou Man's husband was Zhuang Shi, and the prince raised his eyebrows slightly. "What did your husband say?" Man Baodao, "Sir said, now my family is like a boat in the ocean, it is still in the shallow sea, when the wind and waves are calm, the days are calm, the sky is high and the sea is broad, in the deep sea, although the sky is wider and the sea is more majestic, let alone the waves, even if the wind is slightly stronger, it is possible to overturn my boat. Besides, my family has a large population and has not deep foundation. It's better to think about internal cultivation. Although the upstarts are enviable, but looking at the history of the past and the present, the people who can survive in the long history are people who have their feet firmly planted on the ground." The prince was a little shaken in his heart, and looked at Man Bao in a daze. Man Bao was unconscious, and continued to ramble. Bai Shan also said that we are still young, we can fight slowly, we can work hard to do more things, but we can't think about finishing the credit for more than 10 years in one day, that way. It is the self that is ruined. I think what they said is right, so Your Highness, let's put this matter down for the time being. In fact, Bai Shan also said at the time, what do you mean by letting the prince buy you? It should be bought by the emperor. He said, the official seal was originally a system established by the emperor and the court to bribe ministers. Now it is the official seal proposed by the crown prince to give you. When you grow up and make great achievements, it will be better for the emperor to bribe you. The emperor is no better than the crown prince. Do you have any face? Man Bao felt that the emperor was stingy, and he might not be willing to bribe her, but she was still a little moved, and with her husband's teaching, she came here to wait for the prince. The prince was silent for too long, and Man Bao felt a little strange, so he couldn't help looking up at him. His Royal Highness, what's the matter with you? The prince returned to his senses, looked at her and said, Master Wei told me that running a family is like running a country. Man Bao nodded, confused. Yeah, is there any problem? Country, and home are not always connected. The prince glanced up and down at Man Bao for a long time, and then sneered after seeing the hair in her heart. Gu once heard some rumors that you have always been lucky and you are a very lucky person. I didn't believe it before, but now Gu Xin, you are a person blessed by God. After all, he walked away with his hands behind his back. Man Bao watched him leave in confusion, grabbed Eunuch Wu who was about to pass in front of her, and asked in a low voice, what do you mean by this, Your Highness? Eunuch Wu gave an ouch, glanced at the prince's back, and said in a low voice, don't you understand, Lord Zhou Xiao? Your Highness said that you are lucky, then you are really lucky. After all, he quickly broke free from Man Bao's hand and ran after the prince. Of course Man Bao knew that she was lucky, but she didn't quite understand how the crown prince suddenly decided this result. After thinking about it for a long time, Man Bao frowned and went to Bai Shan, told Bai Shan what the prince said, and asked, what do you mean by prince? Bai Shan also frowned and thought for a while, then said unsurely, because Your Highness thinks that both Lord Wei and Mr. Wei are protecting you. After a while, the matter of Mr. Wei's disapproval of the official seal of Zhou Jin and his wife also spread to the East Palace. Although some people lingered in front of Bai Shan and said that Wei Ji was suppressing Man Bao or something, he had only heard of Bai Shan Bei who taught a lesson by Mr. Erlang knew that Wei Ji was protecting Man Bao in disguise, and he didn't take it to heart. At this moment, the only thing that can make the prince say that Man Bao is lucky is this. Man Bao thought about it for a while, but wasn't quite sure, should it be? The ignorant two did not know that after the prince returned to his residence, he asked Eunuch Wu to bring a pot of wine. Eunuch Wu hesitated for a while, and instead of taking a whole pot, he only filled a bottle of wine at the bottom. Ever since he knew that the prince could not drink too much, otherwise it would affect the heirs, both the prince himself and the people around the prince were deliberately quitting drinking. Although sometimes drinking is inevitable at banquets, the prince drank very little. At least, he hadn't been drunk once in the past 6 months. Eunuch Wu poured a glass of wine for the prince. The prince took a sip and sighed, some people seem to be born smart. It's really strange. If you're the prince alone, why haven't they been able to read? Eunuch Wu immediately said, His Royal Highness, you are the crown prince, you don't need to be very good at reading. People like Lord Zhou Xiao and young Master Bai, who are now able to study and learn, will serve you in the future. The prince thought about it and said, it's true. He raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, then let's start from now on, go and find Sujian. Chongguan Museum is a lonely companion, such a small place can't be mixed with different people, right? Bai Shan and the others didn't know that there would be an earthquake in Chongguan Hall, because they were going home the next day. Moreover, the earthquake shook other people, and had nothing to do with Bai Shan and the others, so they were happy the next day, and they went out of the palace without knowing anything. Yin Or was still on the same road with them, and said to Bai Shan, I may be sick in 2 days, you don't have to worry, it will be fine for at most a 10-day. Man Bao 3 people. Bai Shan quickly understood and asked, the Mid-Autumn Festival is coming, can we spend the Mid-Autumn Festival together? Yin He smiled and said, it should be possible, the Crown Prince is not a vegetarian, everything in the DPRK is busy, this is a small matter, even if someone makes use of the topic, half a month is enough for them to make trouble. Only then did the 3 of them feel relieved, and Man Bao said, at that time, we will go to the streets to enjoy the lanterns together during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Yin He nodded, this year, I'm very sick, and I should be able to go out. My sisters should be able to make light sheds. When the time comes, I invite you to come and sit in my light shed. In previous years, Yin Shi couldn't go out, and the night dew was very cold. Who knows if he would get sick just because of a breath of cold air, or go away because of an illness. But he is much better this year and should be able to go. Man Bao looked at him sympathetically and said, I originally wanted to make pills for you, the pills are not that bad, but I researched and found that the pills are not as effective as the decoction, so you should continue to drink the decoction. Yin Or taking medicine is more common than drinking water, and he said with a smile, it doesn't matter, the decoction is also good. They talked and laughed and walked to the gate of the palace. Lu Huan, who ran to the gate of the palace with several classmates, saw it from afar, and waved, why are you walking so slowly, where are you going to play today? Zhao Liaolang said that a banquet was held in the Zhuangyuan building to celebrate our victory. Man Bao said, his father was beaten and his head was swollen, where did he win? That's better than Lord Wang. Lu Huan looked around and said in a low voice, I heard that Wang Ji was not strict with the family, and allowed his nephew to step on the young crops of the farmer. Now he has been asked by His Majesty to think about it behind closed doors. Good night. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1614. Man Bao and Bai Shan frowned and asked, why don't we know what happened just now? Man Bao and Bai Shan looked up at the rising sun on the horizon together, and asked, it's early in the morning, and isn't it Huomu today? Huh? That's the afternoon of yesterday. 3 people, can you be more rigorous? Bai Shan sighed, turned his head and said to Man Bao, it seems that this is not over yet. Man Bao waved his little hand and said, it has nothing to do with us. Let the adults make trouble for themselves. Zhuangyuan building, isn't it? Have you invited me? Lu Huanal said, he said, everyone in the Chongquen Museum can go there if they want, and of course you are included. Speaking of which, you are also quite unlucky this time. I heard that you were given a book by yourself, and you were also punished. Salary. It's really disgusting that you can't lift the pot without opening it. Man Bao turned around and handed the basket to Daji, who was waiting beside him. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang also handed over their luggage to Daji, then mounted the horse together and asked Yin Or, are you going? Yin Or thought for a while, he would be sick when he went back, and this meal was probably the only one that could be eaten outside for a while, so he nodded, turned into his own carriage, and went too. As soon as a group of students from Chongquen Hall left the palace, they went straight to the Zhuangyuan building without even going home. Adults like Chen Yi are disdain to participate in their gatherings. Although they are not a few years older than Zhao Liaolang, they are subconsciously divided into 2 factions in the Chongquen Pavilion. One faction is the prince's confidant, and they are all recruited by him, mainly to experience and work. The other faction is Zhao Liaolang Fengzone Ping Baishan, who was either selected or stuffed in, mainly to accompany the prince to study. Chen Er and the others don't like to play with Zhao Liaolang and the others, and Zhao Liaolang and the others still don't like to play with them. Therefore, counting Man Bao, there were only 10 people who went to the banquet, and all of them went in to study. Seeing that none of them were left, Zhao Liaolang came all over, cheered up, and waved his hand. If you have anything you want to eat, just order it, I'll treat you today, and no one is welcome. Bai Shan laughed, didn't even read the menu, and directly reported the names of the two signature dishes of the Zhuangyuan building. When Zhao Liaolang saw it, he patted his shoulder happily and said, "Yes, just like Bai Shan, you're welcome." Everyone didn't want to be polite to him. They ordered a lot of wine and food, and they didn't care if they could finish it. Although the food in the palace is not bad, it must not be too caring. They are not like princes and princesses. If you want to eat delicious food, you have to take money to buy it at the Shangxi Bureau. Want. So every time you go out of the palace, everyone has to make waves. Only this time it's more turbulent. When the food and wine came up, everyone raised their chopsticks. Zhao Liaolang poured wine for others, raised the wine glass and said to everyone, "This time we are in trouble together, we have to work together again in the future, we can't let outsiders bully us. Don't think that we are just students of Chongquen Museum and can be bullied casually." Everyone raised their glasses noisy. Man Bao didn't like to drink, so he only clinked his glasses and didn't drink. Yin Zhe just raised his glasses. Zhao Liaolang knew that Yin might not be able to drink, and he didn't force him, but he had some opinions on Man Bao. "It's not spirits, you're so old, what's wrong with taking a sip?" Man Bao said, "It's bitter, it's not good to drink at all." Everyone laughed, and Yi Xiang laughed while drinking. "You haven't realized the good taste of wine yet." Everyone let her go. The group ate from morning to noon, until the family came to find them, and then dispersed. Full of food and drink, Man Bao ran home on a red G in the face of the sun. The people in the family were not very worried about them, because Daji shipped their things back early in the morning, and then told everyone that they went to a restaurant for dinner and had a classmate for a banquet. So when Manbao came back, the old Zhutu asked her, "Did you eat well?" Manbao nodded and said, "It's very good. I don't think I have to eat at night. Dad, their braised pork and steamed pork are very delicious. I'll invite you to eat next time." When he said that, old Zhou was drooling. He turned his head and said to Xiao Qian, "Old everyone, do you have meat at home, or do we eat steamed meat at night?" Xiao Qian responded with a smile, "Yes, but some are not enough. Lejun and I will buy some later, steam some more, and put it in the well to freeze it and eat it tomorrow." To say the most satisfying thing about this house is that there are many wells. Basically, every yard has a well, and there are 2 ancient wells in the garden. The water is very good. On a hot day, it is cold and cold, whether it is used for meat or melon and fruit. And you don't have to fetch water, which is great. When Man Bao listened, she felt that she could actually eat a little more at night. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang also felt that they could eat again, so they looked at Man Bao together. Man Bao was very clever and invited the two of them together, "Come to my house for dinner tonight." Bai Shan and Bai Erlang nodded together. After Man Bao ate at their house for several months, they could finally come to her house for a meal. It was rare for Man Bao to come back, so Lao Zhutu showed her his achievements in the past 8 days. "Your eldest brother and I have walked through many cities and towns in the capital, and finally found all the fruit trees you want to plant. Go and see, the garden fruit trees have been planted here, and they will bear fruit in 3 or 2 years, and then you can walk everywhere and stretch out your hand to pick and eat." Man Bao nodded again and again, and suddenly felt that her stomach was a little small, but overeating is not good. She has made a mistake today. The old Zhutu asked, "But I forgot to ask you. I heard from you that the job field will not be given to you after you are not an official. Then this house, if you are not an official in the future." "Don't worry, Dad, even if I'm not an official in the future, this house is mine," Man Bao said. "It wasn't given by the court and the emperor, it was given by the prince, and the house deed is in my hands." Old Zhutu breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. I'm afraid that this fruit tree will be cheaper for others in the future." He looked left and right, and then asked in a low voice, "Have you asked the adults in the palace? Can we cultivate the farm by ourselves?" Man Bao. She didn't dare to say that she forgot, so she said without changing her face, "Father, it's only August, I'm the work field that will be divided after they have cultivated this year, and they have to wait for them to harvest all the crops in the field. I will share it only after I receive it, and the land after September belongs to me." The old Zhutu expressed his understanding. Yes, after all, the last adult produced seeds and labor, and it is indeed a family. I heard that Yangzhou was hit by a disaster this year. Many crops were dry and the harvest was not good. Man Bao nodded. Old Zhutu, so you have to take care of this land yourself. If you leave it to the adults in the palace, you will definitely worry about your own family. How can you still have the heart to worry about your family's fields? He used his own mind to guess the minds of others, citing an example. For example, if a place suffers a disaster and needs to be watered, should you water yourself first, or yours first? Without waiting for Manbao's answer, he said directly, "Of course, I'll water my own fields first, then my relatives, and then my neighbors and friends. In the end, when it's your turn, there's no water. You say you still have water. Prophet." Man Bao opened his mouth wide, and it took a while to find his own voice. "Dad, you are so smart, but the officials in the Ministry of Household Management seem to have no job fields. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1615. It doesn't matter if there are any, anyway. The old Zhou was stunned to make Man Bao promise to go to the palace next time to ask if this job field can grow by himself. Man Bao couldn't bear to mention it, so he could only answer. Her vacation is not long, except for the party this morning. There is still a day and a half left so far, so she cherishes it very much. She felt that everything that sister-in-law made was delicious, even the fried tofu dregs. It happened that Xiao Qian looked at Man Bao and felt that she was losing weight, so he fed her when he caught Kong. When he was feeding her, he couldn't help feeding Bai Shan and Bai Erlang who were following her. From the moment they went home, the three of them had never had an empty stomach. Man Bao kept saying, "This is not right. It is not good for the body. What can I do if my stomach can't rest all the time?" But I still couldn't help but want to eat it. Even Bai Dalan ate a lot of food, which provoked Zheng Shi and Madame Lu to say, "I usually don't hurt them, why is it like I haven't eaten enough in 3 lifetimes?" Mrs. Lu said with a smile, "Auntie Rong's food is too delicate, and what Auntie Zhou makes tastes good. Not to mention a few children, even us adults find it delicious." Zheng Shi thought about it too. There are many things Xiao Qian's cook that they don't usually do, such as fried beans and fried tofu dregs. Although the things are thick, she can make them taste good. Man Bao not only had enough to eat at home, but before entering the palace, Xiao Qian she also filled her with a jar of sauce and said, "Bring it into the palace, you can stumble over steamed buns and porridge to eat, and eat more food. You can gain weight." Man Bao touched his little face that seemed to be round again, and said, "Sister-in-law, I think it's enough to be this round, and it won't look good if it's round." "Nonsense, you're blessed with a round face, it's better to be fat. Being as fat as Prince Gong is not a blessing, but a sickness." Bai Shan tilted his head and thought about Man Bao's appearance as fat as King Gong. He shuddered and took the sauce. "Forget it, don't eat it, we'll eat it for you." Xiao Qian said immediately, "I prepared it for you too." After all, she quickly took out 2 other jars of sauce of the same size. As soon as Bai Erlang saw it, he immediately took it with joy, and thanked him with a particularly sweet mouth. "Thank you, sister-in-law Zhou." Xiao Qian squinted her eyes. She still subconsciously regarded Bai Erlang as the second young master of the landlord's family in the village. "If the second young master likes to eat, I will cook more for you next time." Bai Erlang nodded again and again. "Mr. Bai, who rarely came to see his son out, felt ashamed of him. Man Bao has also snatched the jar back from Bai Shan's hand. Zhou Lejun, who had been waiting in the car for a long time, saw that they were still chattering, so he lifted the curtain and said, "Little aunt, if you don't leave, it will be too late again." The family already knew about the impeachment and punishment of the three because of their late entry into the palace. There was no way. Today is the day of receiving the salary. Man Bao does not say, the family will know when they go to receive the salary. But this time, it wasn't the three of them who took the initiative to explain it, it was Master Bai who knew the news somewhere and came back and beat up Bai Erlang, and drove Bai Erlang from the east courtyard to the west courtyard, and then the whole family was gone. Understood? For this matter, Bai Dalan was also punished and knelt for a long time, because he was studying in the Kuazijian, he was well informed, and he must have known it a long time ago. Bai Dalan slandered while kneeling. Didn't he see Mr. Zhuang's indifference when entering and leaving the palace every day, as if he didn't take this matter to heart, so he didn't say anything? If you have the ability to find him, why can't you find Mr. Zhuang? Mr. Zhuang was in the Chongquen Museum with them. In terms of news, is there anyone who knows better than him? When the old Zhutu found out about this, he felt nothing but heartache, while Qianxi was a little scared, pulling Man Bao and asking, "Will the officials in the palace beat you because you were late?" "No," Man Bao said, "this kind of thing is just a fine, how can you beat someone?" Qianxi was relieved. However, the old Zhutu has developed a habit of waking up every day before dawn, and then waiting to call Man Bao. Today was the day they entered the palace, so he got up very early. When he got up, the stars and the moon were still hanging in the sky. When he stretched out his hand, he could only see the vague 5 fingers. It was quiet and no one woke up. But he just stood outside the door of Zhou Dalan and Xiao Qian in his clothes, and shouted in the door, "Dalan, it's not too early, it's time to get up." Zhou Dalan slept in a daze. When he woke up, he was sure to hear his father's voice. He thought he was sleeping late, but he got up in the dark and looked out the door. The moon was still hanging in the air. Old Zhutu was still standing outside the door, and when he saw that he was the only one who got up, he disliked it and said, "What's the use of you getting up? Tell your wife to get up, today Manbao and the others are going to enter the palace, you have to prepare breakfast earlier, don't follow the last time I didn't have my meal, I was late." He murmured, "I'll be deducted 2 months' salary for being late. 12 sums of money will be deducted, oh my heart." As soon as Zhou Dalan, who was still complaining, heard this, he immediately stopped complaining, and immediately went to shake his wife awake and let her get up for breakfast. Old Zhou Tiou heard his daughter-in-law's voice, so he turned to find his daughter-in-law satisfied. Each courtyard door will be locked at night, but because all the family members live, they will not add iron locks. Lao Zhutu will go out with a bunch of keys. He will directly open the courtyard door of the main courtyard and go in. After waking up, I thought about it, and went to the east side courtyard to wake up Bai Shan and Bai Erlang. When the 3 of them got up, they all looked stunned, and Man Bao sat directly in the yard and bathed in starlight for a long time before realizing what she had done. She looked up at the stars and the moon hanging in the sky, and finally went to wash her face and comb her hair with a sad face. Zhou Lejun and Zhou Liru, who were in the same yard, were also awakened by the old Zhutu. Zhou Liru stayed for a while, then turned over and fell asleep again. Lejun did it by the bed for a long time, and then got up to wash up with hazy eyes, and helped her sister-in-law organize her hair. The oil lamp was lit in the house. Man Bao yawned, tears welled up in the corners of his eyes, and asked, "Why are you up so early? I'll go to the imperial city with you." "Are you getting a salary?" "It's not time yet, the household department hasn't started work yet." Zhou Lejun said, "No, I'll wait for the classmates of the younger uncle and the others, and then I'll go to receive the salary." Man Bao asked blankly, Wait for them to do. Many of my uncle's classmates want to buy whitening cream, but I think they are too embarrassed to come, or they have been busy for the past 2 days, so I decided to deliver it directly to my door. In fact, the business is not yet settled, but Bai Shan let his classmates know that he was using whitening cream, and the classmates were a little interested. But Zhou Lijun, who has accumulated a lot of inventory recently, continues to sell, so she doesn't mind providing better service. She will deliver it to them at the gate of the palace in person. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1616. Because they got up too early, everyone had plenty of time. After breakfast, there was still time to fight for the sauce, but Zhou Lijun couldn't wait. She had long ago carried a large box of bottles and boarded the car. Seeing that they didn't leave, I couldn't help but urge. The three of them collected the sauce, stuffed it into the basket, and went out together on horseback. At this moment, the genius is bright, and the market has not opened for a long time. There are not many people on the street. The three of them ride on horses and say disappointedly, "It's too early, can we go into the palace?" They don't know if the gate of the palace is open or not, but the gate of the imperial city is open. But the soldiers guarding the gate gave them a strange look, but there is no need to check in detail here at Suzaku Gate. Basically, you only need to check the people who go in and make sure that no strangers or weapons are entrained in. At this time, there were not many people in the imperial city except the slaves who cleaned the streets, and their carriages went smoothly all the way to the door of Qingtianmen. The guards guarding the gate saw the three people riding on horses and the carriage marked by the Bai family. "Is it too early?" Man Bao jumped off the horse. At this moment, she was blown away, but she became more energetic, and said, "Do you think we are happy? Didn't the elders in the family wake up before dawn? Okay, let's check." Bai Shan handed over the horse to them. This time they didn't panic. They could register directly here, and they would send someone to send the horse to the East Palace. The horses were quickly brought in through inspection, and then they took their luggage down and lined up for inspection. There were only 3 of them at the moment, and they had plenty of time, so everyone was in no hurry. The guards checked it very carefully. When they saw that they all brought a jar, they opened it, and a fragrance came out. The guards couldn't help sniffing, and looked down at the blackened sauce. This is beef sauce." Man Bao also sniffed and said, "I heard some time ago that some cattle died of old age. This is a sauce made from minced old beef." The guards couldn't help but swallow their saliva. As the guards who often can only eat work meals, this sauce is very attractive. The guard who inspected it was sure that there was no problem, so he immediately covered the jar, and said, "Your cook still has the skill to make sauce." Man Bao said proudly, "This is what my sister-in-law cooked, and my sister-in-law can make a lot of sauce." The guards checked the things with indescribable envy, and then signaled that they could go in, but the 3 of them didn't move. The guards always felt that the fragrance of the sauce in their baskets was still wafting out from there, so they said, "What are you doing standing still? Go in." Man Bao said, "Let's put things away first, and we'll wait for others." Zhou Lijun also jumped out of the carriage, glanced at the guards curiously, and then sauntered to Bai Shan's side. "Little uncle, when they come, please help me with a few words of kindness." Bai Shan nodded solemnly, indicating that there was no problem at all. Bai Erlang said, "He doesn't know how to say good things. He has to find me when he says good things." Lijun took advantage of the situation and said, "The second young master, you also have a good word for me." Bai Erlang said, "Then you have to change your name. You already call him uncle, can't you call me uncle?" Zhou Lijun glanced at Bai Erlang, who was not much taller than her, and was reluctant, he called after my aunt, "What's your basis?" "I'm your sister-in-law's younger brother." "So what? Didn't I also take classes under Mr. Zhuang's door?" "The same gentleman, whether father or son are senior brothers, I can call you brother Yishan at most." "Shirojiro." Bai Shan and Man Bao burst out laughing. Bai Erlang felt that she was too tricky, and said to Man Bao, "In this way, it seems that I am younger than you all." The four of them were gags, but they became more and more energetic, but the guards were sleepy. Seeing that they had been standing still, they simply waved them aside and did not disturb them from taking a nap here. No one is here at the moment, so they can take advantage of this moment to quietly squint. After waiting for a long time, a classmate finally came. The first to come was Feng Zonping. He was also punished by his grandfather when he went back this time. It didn't matter if it was a big deal, anyway, he had to show his attitude. And as a young man who has just grown up, being late is really not a good habit, so he was punished. It was a little early today, he thought he was early enough, but he didn't expect that someone was earlier than him, and it was so much earlier. Bai Shan glanced at the upright sundial and said, "We arrived a quarter of an hour earlier than you." Feng Zonping jumped off the horse, threw the horse to his servants, took the luggage from the servant's hand, and asked speechlessly, "Why are you here so early?" Bai Shan asked back, "Then why did you come so early this time?" "Well, everyone has a parent of the same style in the family." Feng Zonping was not in a hurry to enter the palace, and asked, "Why don't you go in since you are here?" Bai Shan smiled without changing his face, "Wait for you." He opened the box Lejun was holding, took out a bottle of moisturizing cream and threw it to him. "The moisturizing cream you asked about last time is 2 taels of silver a bottle, please pay." Zhou Lejun opened his mouth wide. What surprised her even more was that Feng Zonping actually opened his purse and took out 2 taels of silver to her, then turned his head and smiled at Bai Shan. "You still remember, I almost forgot." Bai Shan looked at his dark face and said, "I'm afraid you won't be able to talk about your daughter-in-law." Man Bao and Bai Erlangle narrowed their eyes. Feng Zonping. He took the ointment and put it in the basket for the guards to check. Seeing that they didn't enter, he simply stood there and talked with them. "Have you heard that Wang Ji beat his nephew, and I heard that his assets all smashed?" Man Bao felt a little pain in his butt, and whispered, "Is this going to avoid impeachment?" "No, but it's also an attitude, isn't it?" Feng Zonping looked around, and then whispered, "My grandfather told me to study hard in Chongquen Museum, and forget about other things. Alas, Prince, it's no longer a dangling child, those of us who are reading companions are just reading with us, and the adults in the court have to come to the exhortation." Not to mention Man Bao and Bai Erlang, even Bai Shandu looked inexplicable. "Does your highness have any advice on this matter? They are late for being late. This is a trivial matter. It is adults who have to make a big fuss, take advantage of their strength to fight tigers, and implicate the prince. Is there anything the prince needs to change in this matter?" Feng Zonping shook his head and wanted to continue talking. As other classmates came one after another, he immediately stopped talking. "See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1617. Yi Ziang and the others came one after another from a distance. Before they got close, they saw 5 people standing in front of the palace wall. After getting off the horse or getting off the car, they couldn't help but ask curiously, "Are you here?" Punished. Bai Shan directly threw him a bottle of whitening cream and said, "No, wait for you guys, I plan to go in together." "Nyo, this is the whitening cream you asked about last time, 2 taels of silver, thank you." Yi Ziang didn't take it seriously, looked at them back and forth while touching the silver, and asked, "Why did you come so early?" Including Feng Zonping, the 4 of them sighed in unison. Lejun, who was standing beside him, said nothing, silently took Yi Xiang's money and put it in his purse. She felt that the little uncle sold things so fast, much faster than she thought. Well, this sigh means a lot. Yi Xiang understood it right away. He also sighed, and then silently took his luggage to the guards to check, not in a hurry to enter the palace, and stood with Man Bao and the others together. Guards. What should I do if I'm a little angry all of a sudden? Can you get in? The guards angrily finished the inspection, then put the basket inside and placed it with the other 4 pieces of luggage. More and more people came. This time, everyone came a little earlier than usual. Bai Shan didn't drop a bottle of ointment when he met anyone. He only chose those who thought the other party would want it. Sure enough, everyone who received the ointment paid for it without asking a question. A classmate who was not very familiar with them even asked, "Why don't you give me a bottle?" Bai Shan glanced at him and asked, "Didn't you already marry and have children?" Feng Zonping, who was holding the whitening cream, felt offended. The classmate said with a smile, "Don't you need to care about your appearance when you get married and have children? Come and give me a bottle." Zhou Lejun cleverly gave a bottle, so without waiting for everyone to come, a total of 12 bottles of a box of whitening cream she brought were sold. She didn't say more than 5 sentences from start to finish, which was beyond her expectations. She took out the heavy purse and put it in the box, then raised her head to look at Aunt and Bai Shan, and said with a serious face, "Aunt, go to the palace, I will wait for Grandpa and Uncle Five. I have to pick up Lumi in a while." That was his own shameful moment. Man Bao sighed, "Go ahead." So they didn't wait for the rest of them, and turned around and entered the palace. They took their luggage and went to the East Palace, and only halfway there, Zhao Liaolang came quickly with his basket and shouted, "Wait a minute." A few people stopped and looked back at him. Zhao Liaolang caught up and asked, "Where's Runbei's Huang, isn't it mine?" Bai Shan blinked and said, "It's sold out, I'll bring it to you next time." Zhao Liaolang couldn't help but mutter, "I asked, but you didn't leave it for me." Bai Erlang disliked him for being noisy, and said, "What's the matter, I'll give you half of it." Zhao Liaolang was surprised, "Didn't you want to split up before?" Bai Erlang said, "I'm not so dark now, so I'm willing." Zhao Liaolang's heart choked, and he glanced at Bai Erlang's face and said, "Actually, it's not much white. I'm more satisfied than you are." Several people ignored the two of them, but Man Bao, who had walked out for a while, remembered and asked, "How's Zhao Qiagong's injury?" Zhao Liaolang waved his hand and said, "It's okay, the bag on my head has disappeared. I've been watching the Wang family's jokes for the past 2 days." Everyone went to the Chongguan Museum laughing and laughing, but they didn't think that this matter had much to do with them. The matter has developed to now, it is already a battle of their adults' interests, they just need to listen to the adults and study in the Chongguan Museum. This is still the case with their group of princes, not to mention Man Bao, she has already been punished, and this matter is over. Who knew that in just one day, the prince looked for her and said, "There is an outpatient clinic, can you go?" Man Bao looked surprised, "Can I still go out to the clinic?" After being shocked, I remembered and asked, "What kind of outpatient clinic?" The prince smiled and said, "The Wang family, Wang Ji has a nephew, you know." Man Bao remembered almost subconsciously, that nephew of the Wang family who rides a horse on a green crop. The prince nodded, "Wang Ji beat him to pieces, people are not very good now, do you want to go out and have a look?" As a doctor, it is her job to save lives and heal the wounded. Of course Man Bao can go, but she finds it strange, how could the prince let her go? Seeing the doubts on Zhou Man's face, the prince smiled and said, "Go if you want. Didn't the Buddhists say that saving a life is better than building a 7-level pagoda? After all, it is a human life." Man Bao got up and said, "Okay, then I'll go." The prince nodded and asked Eunuch Wu to send her out of the palace, and also brought her some good medicine from the storeroom. Man Bao followed Eunuch Wu outside the palace in confusion and asked, "Eunuch Wu, are you going with me?" Eunuch Wu said with a smile, "Our family can only send a little adult to the gate of the East Palace. Wrong, I will drive you. The concubine of the Wang family is waiting outside the palace. You can just follow him." Man Bao still felt strange. "Why did your highness think of calling me? Wouldn't it be more convenient for other imperial physicians in the palace to come and go?" Eunuch Wu smiled and said, "This is his highness's personal affair. It's not easy to call other imperial doctors, and the mother and son of the Wang family also believe in the little adult's medical skills." Man Bao asked in a low voice, "Have the prince reconciled with Lord Wang?" Eunuch Wu lowered his voice and said with a smile, "You are joking. The prince is the king, and Lord Wang is the minister. Where is the conflict between the ruler and the minister? It's just political disagreement. That is no reconciliation." Man Bao felt even more strange. She carried the medicine box and said, "I am a doctor, I only save people." Rao is Eunuch Wu, who has experienced hundreds of battles. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He glanced at Zhou Man, and said angrily and funny, "Oh my little lord, where have you been thinking? Your highness will let you go, of course, to save people." He paused for a while, but still gave Zhou Man a bit of insight. "The prince of the Wang family asks to come, but it is not easy for his highness to refuse. After all, it is a human life, and his highness should accept it." Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief and assured Eunuch Wu, "I will do my best. Isn't it just spanking? Most likely it's bruised or injured. However, there is a lot of meat on the butt, so it shouldn't be tight." Man Bao thought so. When he arrived at the gate of the East Palace, Rong Si was already waiting, took her medicine box and drove out of the palace, and checked again at the gate of the palace. Because of the prince's warrant, Man Bao was able to leave the palace. When he arrived outside the palace, a man hiding in the corner immediately flew up. Man Bao lifted the curtain to see that he was only a few years older than them, and said, "Are you going to ride with us?" Wang family Shuzi glanced at Zhou Man and breathed a sigh of relief, and immediately said, "Thank you, Lord Zhou Xiao, I have a car at home, we'll go now." "Ha ha ha ha, to scare you, this is the real. See you tomorrow, I'm going out to find something to eat, good night." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1618. The two carriages, left the imperial city, and then turned a corner and entered Chongyuan Square. Man Bao disliked the heat, so he had already rolled up the curtains and blinked when he saw the car turning into a street he was familiar with. But before the car reached her house, it turned a corner and went directly through Chongyuan Square to the Guang Square behind. Finally the car stopped in front of a side door. The prince of the Wang family jumped out of the car, trotted over to invite Man Bao, and pointed with a sweaty face, "Please, please, my elder brother is inside." Man Bao couldn't help but glanced at him and asked, "I still don't know what the son's name is." "In Xiaowangda, Wang Rong is my brother." Wang Rong was Wang Ji's broken nephew. Man Bao followed people into the side door, and as soon as he entered, there was a yard. There were servants waiting early in the morning, and when he saw someone, he immediately went to the yard. Man Bao thought he was going to the backyard, but when he entered a door, he found that it was an independent second entry courtyard. A very young woman was standing in the corridor crying, next to a wet nurse holding a child. She saw Zhou Man carrying a medicine box. She immediately greeted him, "Is it the imperial Dr. Zhou in the palace?" Man Bao nodded. She wiped away her tears immediately and invited her into the room. "Mother is waiting." Immediately, the girl lifted the curtain again, and when Man Bao entered the room, he smelled the strong smell of medicine. A middle-aged woman was sitting in front of the bed crying, and there were two doctors in the room. As soon as Man Bao saw the two husbands, he couldn't help but let out a snort, because they were very familiar. One was Dr. Ding, and the other was Zhenggu. Man Bao stared at Zhenggu. You didn't enter the palace today. Zhenggu, master, my disciple was here last night. The young woman called the middle-aged woman mother, and Man Bao knew that she was Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang quickly got up and said to Man Bao, Dr. Zhou, look at my son. He has been burning since last night. Man Bao nodded again and again, put down the medicine box, and stopped taking his own pulse pillow. He directly took the hand of the person lying on the bed and put it on Dr. Ding's pulse pillow to check the pulse. Ah! Dr. Ding glanced at Zhou Man, and simply lifted the cloth covering the patient's body to show her the wounds on his buttocks and waist. He can't lie down. Man Bao was startled when he saw the wound. Why is it so serious? This is like torture. I saw that Wang Rong's lower back and the base of his thighs were all smashed. Maybe it was because of poor care or the weather was too hot. At this time, the wound was already pus. This was not one or two small wounds, but a wound. Blockbuster. Man Bao has only seen the cane torture once, that is when Xiang Chao was beaten when he filed a lawsuit last year. At that time, Xiang Chao was also unable to move and was seriously injured. But the weather was already cold at that time. Although he was in the prison, there was a lot of medicine. In addition, Xiang Chao's muscles and bones were strong, so he only had a low-grade fever twice before he came over without any risk. Man Bao looked at the pus on his body again, and couldn't help but reached out and touched his forehead. Dr. Ding lowered his voice and said, it has been burning since last night, and it was seen by the doctor from the Baohe Medical Center. Because of Zhou Man and imperial physician Zhang, Ji Shitang was more or less considered to be close to the prince, so the Wang family asked the doctor to avoid Ji Shitang at first. It was because the situation was not right last night, so the Wang family went to invite Dr. Ding to come over. Zhenggu came to study with him. He thought it was a minor illness, but they all spent the whole night here. Man Bao felt the pulse, looked at the face and mouth on the other side, and then went to the Baohe Medical Center and the prescription prescribed by Dr. Ding. Man Bao picked up a pen and wrote a new prescription for the Wang family, saying, go get the medicine, it's taken internally, let's deal with his trauma. Dr. Ding looked at Man Bao's prescription with a calm expression on his face, but he couldn't help but be surprised. He just hadn't seen him for a few months, and Zhou Man's prescription was already above him. Dr. Ding looked at Zhou Man, and his heart was full of surprise. Such a person, deserved to be successful. Man Bao was still looking at the wounds on Wang Rong's waist and buttocks, and asked without looking back, Dr. Ding, shall we clean up his wounds? Zhenggu found that Dr. Ding was distracted, so he stretched out his hand and poked him. Dr. Ding instantly recovered and nodded quickly, yes, I have to clean up the pus and bad meat, and then cover it with Panax Noto ginseng powder. However, Man Bao thought for a while and said, I'm afraid it's not good enough to use Panax Noto ginseng powder alone. Let's get some more herbs. After speaking, he wrote another prescription and asked the Wang family to go to Ji Shitang to get it. When the three of them were busy, a servant came in and said, Ma'am, the shopkeeper she from the Baohe Medical Center is here. Mrs. Wang didn't want to see anyone. After her son was beaten, she went to Baohe Medical Center for diagnosis and treatment. As a result, the more the person was treated, the worse it became. Man Bao had already seen the prescription from the Boal Medical Center. Although she did not know what the other party's initial condition was, she had also treated the cane and knew that the original prescription was fine. So he said, Madam, why don't you let someone come in and ask, maybe the other party has found a good remedy. Shopkeeper she didn't find a cure, but he found some new prescriptions for trauma, so he came with the medicine. Dr. Neng came with him. When they entered the room, they were surprised when they saw Man Bao. Isn't she an imperial physician in the palace? Why did she come out? Man Bao raised his hand to greet them, smelled a little familiar medicinal smell, shrugged his nose and asked, "Did you bring the grass ginseng?" Shopkeeper She paused for a while and then nodded and said, "Yes, it has been ground into powder, and I still have kudzu powder." Manbao sighed and said happily, "I just want them." Shopkeeper She immediately followed the stick and said with a smile, "Let me help you, do you want to prepare a wound medicine?" Dr. Ding glanced at him, stood beside Zhou Man, and said, "We are planning to treat the injury on Prince Wang's body. The wound has been exposed all the time." Shopkeeper She also saw it and couldn't help sighing, "It has to be dealt with." Manbao invited them together and said, "The area of the wound is too large. Dr. Ding and I don't know how long it will take to clean it up. Shopkeeper She and Dr. Ning will come together." Shopkeeper She brought the medicine to the door at this time to save his reputation, so he naturally wanted to, so he looked at Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang has been in heartache since she lifted the cloth. Her good son has been beaten like this. When she heard Manbao ask, she raised her tearful eyes and asked, "How do I clean it up?" Manbao said, "The pus must be cleaned out, the bad meat must be cut off, and then the medicine will be applied, so that he can get better faster. He is in trouble both internally and externally. If he is inside, he can only lower the temperature as much as possible, and the medicine will be boiled in a while. Drink a dose of medicine to see if it doesn't work, and then change the prescription, but this trauma must be treated as soon as possible. You have seen this injury, if it is not handled well, he will." See you at 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1619. Mrs. Wang immediately put down her prejudice against Baohe Medical Center and asked Shopkeeper She and Dr. Ning to stay for treatment. Shopkeeper She and Dr. Ning breathed a sigh of relief, and smiled gratefully at Zhou Man and Dr. Ding. Dr. Ding smiled back, and then they began to have the soft couch cleaned, put the couch in the middle of the house, and carried the person onto the soft couch. Then Manbao drove most of the Wang family out. There are too many people, and it is easy to bring in dirty things. Now his wounds are most afraid of dirty things. Mrs. Wang let her pale-faced daughter-in-law go out. She was afraid of her son's wound, not to mention she was so young. She only left 2 girls to follow her orders. The doctors ordered hot water, and after cleaning their hands separately, they began to take out their knives, and then looked at Manbao together. Manbao used acupuncture to relieve the pain. In fact, he was in pain all the time, so the operation would be more convenient, because his pain tolerance increased, but he was in a coma at the moment. After confirming that the painkiller was effective, everyone stood on both sides and cleaned each side. Mrs. Wang was wiping her tears silently, when she suddenly saw 4 doctors standing on both sides, holding a knife and slicing the flesh off her son's body. Zhenggu stood on the sidelines to observe and study, and immediately took the time to comfort her. "Mrs. Wang, this is to cut off the rotten flesh on the prince's body, so it will be better faster." Mrs. Wang was not comforted at all, but her face showed ruthlessness, which surprised Zhenggu. The 4 of them were very careful, lowered their heads and gently cleaned up the pus, and then cut off the meat that was determined to be dead. Seeing that everyone was very focused, Dr. Ding took the opportunity to hand Zhenggu the prescription he had just collected, and asked him to prepare the wound medicine according to the prescription. After they cleaned up, Zhenggu also prepared the wound medicine and boiled the medicine. The 4 doctors carefully gave him medicine to stop the bleeding, and then took a clean white cloth and gently covered his lower back and buttocks. Dr. Ding wiped the sweat from his forehead and said to Manbao, "Wake up the person, let him take the medicine." Manbao responded, puncturing the needle to wake him up. Wang Rong opened his eyes in a daze and didn't have much consciousness at all, But when Dr. Ning and Dr. Ding saw his eyes opened, they swiftly lifted the man halfway up and took the boiled medicine and poured it on him. The action is particularly fast and neat. Who didn't come from the drug boy? After filling the medicine, everyone put the patient back on the couch, and then began to wait and see the situation. Mrs. Wang waited for a while, but couldn't help but ask Man Bao, "Dr. Zhou, my son." Man Bao said, "Wait and see the situation. If the fever does not subside after half an hour, then change the medicine." Man Bao looked at shopkeeper Shi and asked, "Does the patient have internal bleeding?" Shopkeeper Shi lowered his eyes and said, "Yes, I used Ji Shitang's Panax Nodo ginseng powder for oral administration at the beginning, and also used Panax Nodo ginseng powder for trauma." "Then how?" Dr. Ning said a little aggrievedly, "The patient is drinking." The doctors were silent. Mrs. Wang noticed that the atmosphere was not very good, and asked after a pause, "What should I do now?" After thinking about it, Man Bao said, "Wait a minute, the internal injury should not be serious, first reduce the fever and then think about stopping the bleeding." Mrs. Wang could only respond. There was a knock on the door, and Mrs. Wang gestured to the 4 doctors, then got up and went out. As soon as she left, the 4 doctors relaxed a little, and talked more freely about the condition. Man Bao said, "The patient still has a heart disease. Depressed mood is not conducive to the healing of the wound. If it wasn't for the depression, he wouldn't drink anymore," said Dr. Ning. He was still a little embarrassed. The patient was his at first, the injury was minor but not minor, mainly because the beating was too hard. "I also hurt my muscles and bones. It's hot and hard to care for now. A person who is not careful dies." But he felt that he handled it well this time. The wound was treated well, and the internal injury was taken into account. The Wang family was not short of money, so he used the best medicines. As long as he survives the first few fevers, he will be fine. As a result, he left after seeing the disease on the front foot, and the patient on the hind foot took a sip of wine in a depressed mood, and then the hemostatic medicines and the healing medicines he prescribed were useless. Man Bao and Dr. Ding gave Dr. Ning a sympathetic look, and were about to ask more details when they heard Mrs. Wang furious outside. "What's wrong? Is he trying to kill our mother and son? You ask him to come in person. Talk to me." The 5 doctors in the room all pricked up their ears, and it seemed that a mammy outside warned in a low voice, "Madam, the master's intention is also for the good of the nephew and the young master, and no one expected that the slaves would be so serious. The old lady has already tied the person, the eldest lady will deal with it as she says, and ask the eldest lady to put the overall situation first." Not to mention outside, the 5 people in the room with their ears pricked up couldn't help but hold their breath. After a moment of silence outside, it was still the mother's voice. The voice was very low, but the doctors had sharp ears, so they still heard it. "Madam, this is a box of ginseng and some good wound medicine from the palace, which is a little bit of our master's and wife's wishes. Please accept it. The imperial physician in the room, you'd better send it away as soon as possible." She lowered her voice and said to Mrs. Wang, "If you want to ask for an imperial doctor, you can ask the master for a post. Don't worry, my wife has already said that before I came, and the family will immediately take the post and ask the imperial Dr. Chen to come. The Dr. Chen is not as old as she's bigger. She's more powerful than her, so don't worry." It's strange that Mrs. Wang was relieved. Her hands under her sleeves were clenched into fists. She was silent and did not speak, and the expression on the mother's face became more and more difficult. "Mother, the servant who went to Ji Shitang to get the medicine has returned." Mrs. Wang immediately recovered and said quickly, "Let him in quickly." She looked at the mammy, twitched the corners of her mouth and said, "Don't worry, Mama Wu, I know that in the future, our family will rely on our uncle to live, and we will focus on the overall situation." Grandma Wang responded immediately and stepped forward to send the maid away. She was not willing, so a maid stepped forward and took her hand affectionately to the courtyard gate, and went directly to the next door. When the people left, Mrs. Wang couldn't hold back her temper and gave a vicious paw in the direction she was leaving. She walked quickly to the wall, and yelled at it, "Weasel gives New Year of the Rooster, when Wronger first brought me back, I knelt down and asked for the imperial doctor, but who saw me? See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1620. One said that he was busy with government affairs, the other said that he was ill and had no time. Now, one of you is not busy, and the other is sick again. She was not at all afraid of being listened to, and she said loudly, "It doesn't feel bad if the board hits her son, what kind of outing? It's a bullshit implicated." Who is implicated, who has no idea? After saying this, he covered his face and cried bitterly, crying loudly, "My poor Wronger, but this spring, riding a horse by the side of the road, the horse stumbled and trampled several seedlings, and the farmer who was planting rice lost 2 seedlings and went down. Make it up, you say you want to lose money, then the farmer jokes that your rich son doesn't know how to be frugal, so 2 seedlings even thought about losing money, but now the seedlings have turned into millet and have to be put away before people are impeached and said that they are riding horses on green crops." She stretched her neck and shouted to the yard over there, "Who is the one who offended people, and then asked people to bribe them to falsely accuse my son? You don't talk about avenging him, but you use him as a scapegoat, and you beat him. I admit to insulting him. Who told him that he lost his father a long time ago and could only rely on his uncle and aunt to live, but you shouldn't count his life? It was clearly said that it was a plank, but the plank as big as a cord rod went down. You are deliberately wanting his life. Is it possible that his death will satisfy your heart, and you have also received a praise for killing your relatives with righteousness?" Mammy heard these words just after passing the courtyard gate. She couldn't help turning around to stop her, but she was held back by Grandma Wang's maid. Grandma Wang also pushed her over there, crying while pushing, "Mummy, please forgive me, my husband's entire back was broken, and I haven't woken up since I fell asleep last night. My mother-in-law stayed up all night with me. My mother-in-law is such a biological son. Husband's injury is like digging her heart like. That can't be nonsense. Let's wait for your husband to wake up. Now that your husband is alive and dead, you and your mother-in-law can't make any sense. As a mother, who doesn't care about children?" This sentence made the mama's face change greatly. She stared at Grandma Wang for a while, then pushed the maid away, turned around and left. When she was far away, Grandma Wang wiped her tears, turned around with the maid, and locked the courtyard door. The words here soon spread to the main courtyard and study. Wang Ji didn't expect that the situation would get worse, so he couldn't help but stand up and turn around twice, asking, "Didn't you send someone over there? Why did you elicit so many words?" Madame Wang closed her eyes and said, "Master, let's ask Imperial Physician Chen first." Wang Ji's face was ugly, and after a while, he said, "I have already been invited, but I don't know if he is on duty today. If he is on duty, we have to wait a little longer." "We can wait, but I'm afraid we won't be able to wait there." Madame Wang couldn't help complaining, "Master is too ruthless this time. Sister-in-law is such a biological son. If something goes wrong..." Wang Ji's face was ashen and he was speechless. How did he know that Wang Rong was so useless? He just played a hard game, but he didn't get through it. However, he was really angry at the time. He sighed, "It's too late to say anything now." Wang Dana's son-in-law actually knelt directly to the entrance of the East Palace. This is a heartbreaking move. Mrs. Wang also sighed, "Let's settle the account when Wang Rong is ready, but Ronger's child has always valued his younger brother. I'm afraid he won't be willing at that time. Why don't you let him go? This is the Wang family, and the overall situation is the most important thing." Man Bao and Dr. Ding listened to Mrs. Wang's scolding with relish in the room, tearing off the foundation of the Wang family. Wang De obediently stood aside, and when his mother was tired, he stepped forward and helped her to sit down in the side room to rest. Aunt Tian, also Wang Da's biological mother, immediately poured tea for her to moisten her mouth, and then said softly, "The medicine has been sent to Imperial Physician Zhou and the others." Mrs. Wang nodded, wiped away the tears on her face, and said to Mrs. Tian, "Go and pack a thicker gift, and you will send Imperial Dr. Zhou out in a while." Aunt Tian responded, turned around and went immediately. Only the mother and son were left in the house, so Mrs. Wang asked Wang De, "How did you beg the prince?" Wang De whispered, "The son said that the prince has a life-saving grace for the elder brother, and in the future our brothers will be ruthless for the prince, even if the elder brother, the prince also has a good reputation for benevolence, why not do it?" The prince listened. "I will agree later." Mrs. Wang breathed a sigh of relief, reached out and patted Wang Da's hand and said, "It's hard for you. Don't be embarrassed, mother, I ordered Imperial Dr. Zhou as you ordered, but is she really okay?" The corners of Mrs. Wang's eyes couldn't help shedding tears again. She pressed the corners of her eyes and said, "You can only try it, don't look at her young age, but she is famous for her medical skills, not only cured the prince, but also showed the empress and emperor. I've been ill, your majesty was so ill before that even your uncle quietly prepared sackcloth, but didn't he rescue him?" She said, "Even a serious illness like his majesty can be cured, your elder brother, should be able to." Mrs. Wang herself was not very confident, but her son's injury looked too terrifying. She raised him for more than 20 years, and she never let him suffer such a big crime. He didn't like to read when he was a child, and she only hit him a few times in the palm of the hand. Mrs. Wang wiped away her tears, cleaned up her facial expressions, and went to the main courtyard to see her son regularly. Treating trauma in summer, especially such a large area, is very difficult and requires a clean environment and careful care. Manbao had taught Zhenggu about these things, and at this time Zhenggu was giving instructions to the servants of the Wang family how to take care of them. Manbao gave people a set of needles to speed up the effect of the medicine. After half an hour, Wang Rong's fever subsided. Seeing that the medicine was effective, Manbao was satisfied. He also prescribed a prescription to their family and said, "This is for oral administration. For the decoction, take the Panax Nodo ginseng powder of Ji Shitang with warm water after an hour interval, it is for hemostasis." Ji Shitang's Nodo ginseng paste and Nodo ginseng powder are not made of Nodo ginseng alone, they are just so called. They also contain other medicinal materials, because the medicinal materials used are not cheap, especially Nodo ginseng. It's from lignin, so it's very expensive. It was because the Wang family was not short of money to use it in such a large amount, but it was not good to use it too much, so Manbao prescribed the amount for them. She stayed at Wang's house until the afternoon, and Wang Rong finally woke up. After she checked his pulse, she said to Mrs. Wang, "Let's come here first today, the trauma has been treated, just let a doctor stay and watch." Mrs. Wang hurriedly sent Manbao out in person. She only got on the carriage here, and there was a knock on the door of the main hospital over there. It turned out that they invited Imperial Dr. Chen.